beta-cryptozanthine, lycopene, and lutein zeaxanthin. There were more carotenoids, of course, but we didn't use those. These are the 5 major ones. And so this column is a correlation between individual carotenoid concentration and RS score. So this is how the individual carotenoid correlated with RS score. And they were all significant. Now, this was correlation between dietary individual. This is the dietary carotenoid, and its relationship and its correlation with RS score, which 2 very significant. The other ones were not. And then this last column is correlation between individual carotenoid concentration in plasma. This is okay, these are the levels in the blood, and with individual dietary carotenoid. Individual carotenoid concentration in plasma with the dietary. And so these were all, 3 of them were not significant, 2 were significant, and so on. And so in conclusion, we skin carotenoid status measured by RS score, and this is of course measured by Veggie meter, can be used to approximate blood carotenoid concentrations and self-reported fruit and vegetable intake in this population group. And but we think that future research is needed to validate this non-invasive and portable technology in diverse populations and use it under different settings, including intervention studies may have been done, published. I have not kept up to date on the research on Veggie meter, telling you the truth, and this is an opportunity to learn about that also. But and also intervention study also in population health studies to determine fruit and vegetable intake by individuals or populations. Thank you, and if there is any question, let me know, please.
Great, thank you so much. Really, really interesting work. There is a question in the chat. So Susan, if you would like to read your question aloud, feel free, but if not, I'm happy to relay your question to the group.
Yeah, let me stop sharing my.
Sure.
Okay, sharing my screen, and
I would be glad to ask. Yes. So with the inclusion of skin tone in the multivariate linear regression, did you use both finger and arm? Or did you do something? Did you average them? Or maybe something else?
We use them separately.
So they were included both together?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to remember, but I think I have to look it up, telling you the truth. That's a good point.
So my next question is, following that, in that regression model, was that skin tone variable significantly associated with the outcome variable? So what was the beta, basically, for skin tone in that regression between looking at the skin carotenoids and plasma? And I'm not sure which one of those was the predictor or the outcome, but I'm curious if skin tone was significant. So you adjusted for skin tone and showed that there was an association independent of skin tone. But was skin tone significantly associated as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. But I don't think the statistician, we looked at we just noted that there is, it does not affect the correlation between the skin tone, does not affect. That was the conclusion. But we are saying to what extent it may have had some effect on it.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm curious as to if skin tone is associated at all. So in the regression, you could think about it if we were looking at, you could say that skin tone was associated with skin carotenoids independent of plasma. So, in the regression, you choose what's the predictor and what's the covariate. So I'm just curious if skin tone was significantly associated in the model itself too. But thank you so much for the study and your time.
Okay, thank you. So your question is, was skin tone correlated with the RS? With the, and range of our skin tone was not that wide really. It was a very close range. Yeah, that's a good question. I can look at that.
Great. And then I had a question kind of for Dr. Faraji, but also for the group as well. I know a lot of us use different measures of dietary intake, and I think more and more we're seeing specific screeners for carotenoid containing foods. And some of them are 44 item I've seen, and some are smaller. So I'm curious for the group and for Dr. Faraji, did you look at the association between the screener, the carotenoid screener, with the predictions from the food frequency questionnaire? And then any other researchers on the call who have used a specific screener for carotenoids, did you compare that to NDSR, food frequency questionnaires, or other more regularly used measures of carotenoid intake?
Yeah, that's a good point. And our food, the carotenoid screener that I used was, again, we got it from USDA, from a colleague at USDA, and it was not validated. And that was one of the problems that I could not publish it at the Journal of the Academy, because they said you have to have a valid, and that's a very good point. But anyway, it's so it's not. I think it's important to use a validated. We were going to validate that screener later on, but then she got a new job at the national level, and I lost track of her. So, but anyway, yeah, that is a good point, that you have to have a validated questionnaire or food frequency questionnaire.
Yeah, I only ask because I've now seen and at some of I was at the International Carotenoid Society conference this last summer, and there were questionnaires for lutein zeaxanthin only containing foods, questionnaires for just foods containing beta carotene. And so as we're trying to kind of nuance out what specific foods are higher quantities of the individual carotenoids, I think having these validated measures is quite important. And there's a lot out there that either have been validated in a very small group, maybe not a diverse population, maybe not specific dietary recommendations for different culturally sensitive and relevant diets. And so a lot of questions, I think, are arising as to what measures of carotenoid consumption we should be using. And yeah, Margarita answered a similar question, or has a similar question, with how many of you have worked with Hispanic populations and different food intake screeners, specifically food items that might be high in certain carotenoids.
Actually, before we move on to this question, I'm thinking that maybe we can table this, since it feels a little bit more part of our discussion piece, and introduce our next speaker, because then we'll have time for everyone to unmute and have a really open conversation. Does that sound okay?
Perfect.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you, Dr. Faraji.
Thank you.